does this book start out, guys? Oh yeah, he's funny. Okay, I'm gonna put this down. Hello, you're watching Rose Squad Reviews, and today we're going to be reviewing the book Dragonhaven by Robin McKinley. And Robin McKinley was one of the authors that I kind of mentioned that I was going to talk about in our little book preview video. So, look at where we are now. I've probably read this book about 4 times now. Not necessarily because it's like that good that I have to read it like 4 consecutive times, but just because I've known about it for a long enough time that I'm like, oh, I like that book, I'm just gonna go back and read it again. So it's been a while since I first started reading this book. And Dragonhaven isn't really your normal Robin McKinley book. It's kind of a little bit different than some of her past work, but recently she's kind of been getting more into this sort of a style of writing. I might have mentioned it a little bit in the preview video, but most of her previous work from Dragonhaven, that way, the past, it's kind of an older style. I mean, now you have more, like, first person is pretty much the only point of view that you're going to get, and just kind of more thoughts from the main character directly to the reader, and so that kind of goes together to make sort of more of a faster paced read, I think, and then the third person kind of allows you to smack more details in there, but just kind of like the differences in writing styles, and I'll probably touch more on this in other reviews of her other books, but this is kind of into the new writing style of more what's kind of the 21st century instead of like the 20th century. If that makes any sense whatsoever. The main character in Dragonhaven is this 15-year-old kid, sort of, who isn't really like most 15-year-old kids. For one thing, his dad is the head director at this dragon sanctuary in Montana, Wisconsin, somewhere. They have like 1 billion miles. So obviously, the US isn't really big enough for it to exist, actually. But it's a sanctuary for dragons that's called Smoke Hill. And so, yes, there are dragons, except they aren't really ever really seen, but there's physical, tangible references, like they'll find scales around the park and other things, but they're just kind of there, but not really there. And dragons are kind of a slowly dying out species. There are a couple other sanctuaries in the world, and they no longer exist in the wild. So it's just kind of like they're sort of reclusive, and we don't really know how many there are, and it's just kind of like what's going on. So it's a federal offense, obviously, to kill one, but what's kind of ironic is it's even more of a federal offense to assist directly in the saving of one. Kind of like, we're just gonna let them do their natural thing, we're just gonna do our natural thing and just make sure nobody kills them, but we're not gonna like really help them either. And Jake kind of gets thrown into this when he finds a baby dragon out in the middle of the park. And being in the environment that he had grown up in, he immediately takes this dragon and like stuffs it up his shirt and tries to, save it. And so thus is the story of Jake and his dragon Lois. And just kind of everything that happens from like point A to point B. It's kind of the general setup. I'm leaving out a lot of details because Jake gives a lot of details. So I'm not going to cover everything. This book is written in the perspective of Jake, your main character. It's first person, and it's him kind of in the future writing about his past. So the events that are described are somewhat limited by what he experienced, and you don't get like, oh, this was going on, this was also going on. You just kind of get like what he experienced, but with hindsight brings a little bit of clarification. He can kind of read in some details that are just like, oh, I didn't know it yet, but this was happening, and just kind of clarify things, because it can get a little bit confusing. And because of this, Jake's voice kind of comes through very clearly. He has his own way of like describing things, and his metaphors are often fairly amusing. And you can also see his character change as he kind of gets older. because the book is sort of written in like 2 installments. It's kind of like the main story, and then you have the epilogue, which is its own little wonderful thing. And now we're going to get into the plot. And just a warning, there's a lot of stuff going on in Dragonhaven. Like, I mean, it's fairly thick, but Jake really likes to talk, and sometimes he'll explain things a lot, and then go off on like tangents, and then he'll come back, and so sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming with the amount of like just explanation that you're given, but the balance between explanation and like actual action kind of helps even things out, so it's not like completely overwhelming. I mentioned the epilogue being its own little thing. Well, the epilogue could be a short story in its very own right because it is like 50 pages long, so the ending is a little bit drawn out, but I think it provides some well-needed detail and resolution to kind of be like, okay, what actually happened afterwards, because, you know, it's kind of good to know you kind of left us at like a midpoint here. We need to kind of resolve everything. So even though it's fairly long, at that point in the book you're kind of already invested in this reading experience, so 50 more pages of resolution ain't gonna hurt. The main thing I would put like a little red flag on is sometimes Jake uses some profanity, I guess is the word I'm looking for. So he kind of, I guess, cusses, and most of the time it's like kind of bleeped out. So unless you actually know what the word is, like I was young enough when I first read it that I didn't really know what he was saying. I was like, whatever, I don't care, I'm just moving on. So he doesn't actually say it, but if you know what it is, it's there. So unless you're clueless like I was, it's something that you might need to be aware of. And while Dragonhaven is just a standalone book, Robin McKinley has written many other books that I will probably talk about at length later on in the time-space continuum later. And the length of this wonderful book is 342 pages, so 300, it's a fair size, and it's, you know, I've kind of made it sound like it's this big, really dry chunk of writing with no action and just like all this exposition going on, but it's actually very interesting, kind of, because he goes to explore several things, like, you know, the existence of dragons and what that means for humankind, and just kind of all sorts of philosophical ideas and revelations and things, which I know is just making it sound really, really boring, but I promise you it's not. It's actually fairly entertaining. So if you like dragons and you like dragons, read this book. Also, Robin McKinley is a wonderful author to check out. Yeah, Robin McKinley. There you go, guys. That's all I have to say. I hope all that made sense. I'm not quite sure what I was saying half the time. If you're interested, feel free to check this book out at your local library, bookstore, etc. Buy it off of Amazon. I don't know. I think it's worth your time. So, yeah.